Hello to everybody out there in the Humans of Customer Success community. We have our community hour today. We're going to be covering how customer success teams can work with product for product road mapping, right? So how to provide input to product teams. I know there's a lot of customer success folks out there in our community, as well as product folks as well. So we have a great panel, as you can see here, Craig, Brendon, and Jonathan. I'll give them a second to introduce themselves in a moment. We're going to cover 3 different topics today. So we're going to cover the kind of input the customer success teams can provide to product. We'll cover how to make the case for product work. And of course, we'll close it out with, the best ways for customer success teams and product teams to all work together in perfect harmony. We'll have lots of time at the end for question and answer. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. There's also a private Q&A tab there if you want to submit a private question to us that's not in front of everybody. My name is Mike Redd. I'm the CMO here at Quala. You'll see Jenna Kluger, who's in the chat, taking everybody's questions. And so with that, I would love to hand it over to our panel just to give a brief introduction if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Super. I'll go first. Hey, I'm Jonathan Tushman. I am the co-founder of Quala. I am a long-time startup guy. For the last 20 years, I've been living at the intersection of product, engineering, and most recently customer success. So the last 5 years, I've been really deep in customer success. I really love the interplay of these 3 things, and I'm thrilled to be here. And before I pass it on to Brendon and Craig, I think my realm of specialty tends to be in the small to growing organizations. So the biggest organizations I really work with have 200 people. I think when you get to Brendon and Craig, they'll have different scopes. So when you hear my feedback down the road, that's kind of my context. How about I pass it to Craig to introduce himself next?
All right. Craig Daniel, General Manager of New Ventures at Toast. Toast is a restaurant software company here in Boston. And the New Ventures role is a product role focusing on new products and new businesses that kind of the next generation for Toast. So what are some new opportunities that we have? Prior to that, I was at a company called Drift. I was head of product at Drift from the very early days. Fewer than 5-6 people on my team to nearly over 500 and something people in the company when I left, and close to 100 million in revenue. So that was quite a run. And so I think that was a great experience to really look at the very early stages, how we deal with customer success and customer feedback, all the way up to scaling it up to a larger company. And then even prior to that, I was at a company called LogMeIn, which had thousands of employees, and actually was part of a team that actually implemented CS rather late in the game, actually. So after we were already about a $50 million business, we brought in CS to get more strategic and upmarket. So very customer driven and customer focused, and always have good partnerships with the CS side. And so very excited to have this conversation.
And I'm Brendon Albrizio. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Crayon. Crayon is a competitive intelligence SaaS platform. We help you track, analyze, and activate what's going on in your market with your competitors. I joined the team when it was 2 people. Today we are 50. So we've been working on scaling it over the past 5 years. Before I joined Crayon, I was an executive at an ad agency, and I co-founded a mobile app startup. And I love this topic, especially as the head of customer success at Crayon. I think that driving alignment and working with product is one of the most important things that a success team can do to make sure that customers get the outcomes that they're looking for, and you can continuously improve the relationships that you're building with customers.
That's great. That's great. And so everybody, I'm sure folks are already doing it in the session chat there. Feel free to introduce yourselves, say hello to other folks in the community as well. And again, I keep those questions coming, throughout the session as we're diving in. Love to hear in the chat, similarities, differences in your own experience. So keep those ideas flowing and the conversation going there. I'll give a quick introduction on Quala, so who's hosting the session. So we host Humans of Customer Success. We're the platform that customer success and product teams use to get deeper insights on their customers. And so what we're doing is we're mining through all that messy qualitative data, your emails, your chats, your calls, to help reveal insights about your customers that are really hard to quantify otherwise. We know a lot of people we talk to are doing this, by hand. We're trying to make that a whole lot easier for you, both to have insights about your business, as well as to trigger the right customer success work for your teams. If you want to learn more about it, there's a big blue Request Quala info button at the top of the session. We'd love to hear from you. You can also check us out on our website, quala.io. So with that, we'll dive into the session here. So we'll start. John's going to kick off a poll just to get a sense from our audience. The question is going to be, how often do customer success and product teams in your business work together to get input for product roadmaps? And so you'll see a range of answers there, everywhere from like all the time to pretty much never, and a whole lot in between. So I'd love to hear how folks are answering that. With that, we'll dive into our first topic for our panel. So the types of input that customer success teams can provide to product teams. And so the first question that will get us going, I'm sure our panel will get rolling on this, is, what kind of product ideas do customer success teams hear, right? You're engaging, talking to customers, every day, all day long. What are you guys hearing?
Yeah, I can jump in and start us off, Mike. I think we hear a couple different types of feedback from customers. So they're from our power users and those that are really diving into the platform. The most popular feedback we get is actually about the user experience. Where is this button? Where is this feature? They're not usually focused on brand new features or new modules. What they're really focused on and where they drive the conversation to is my everyday job, my everyday work I'm doing inside of platform is this. And I would love if, this button was over here, or if I could both do something there. So from our power users, that's usually the number one thing that they talk about. And then from our executive decision makers and budget holders, what we usually hear from them is, can I understand how my team is using it? So more features around user analytics. And can I quantify the revenue impact? Now that could be relatively unique to Crayon because we're tracking competitors and helping you win in competitive situations. But those are typically the two things that they come to the CS team and really, really ask for.
That's great. So some UX in there. There's some different types of users, different use cases. It's interesting you separated the kind of the economic buyer from kind of the day-to-day users.
Yeah, one of the challenges I find the conflicts are that product teams are usually accountable for what's next, what's new, what's going to drive the next line of revenue, how do we land and expand these customers, et cetera, et cetera. And meanwhile, the customer success teams are getting beat up on the details like UX things, or this export doesn't have this column that I expected. And I think it's really critical to, depending on your stage, to have a different motion for this collaboration. But what's probably most important that I've learned in product leadership is when you start something new, you have a new bet, a new initiative, kind of like what I do. That's my full-time job now. You should have a new team for that, right? Don't steal from the core team, the core engineering team, or the core amount of resources to go work on the new thing, because you're starving that iteration and polish and just improvement on that core product, which is what most customers have bought you for. And so I've made a mistake many times in my career, but have since probably in the last few years fixed it, which is fine. We're going to go and chase this new thing, but we're going to use new budget, new hires. Maybe we'll bring some people over and backfill them, but we got to make sure we're staffing up that team so that we can keep that same customer centricity and focus and iteration on smoothing out all those UX issues that Brendon was just talking about, the UX issues and the gaps in the product that get it from good to great.
Yeah. I echo a bunch of those things. Actually, it's really cool to hear you guys both say that. It really echoes the experience that my teams have had at Quala and at Insight Squared in teams past. It really is those usability and the edges of the product that these guys are using day to day. The other thing that we really get from our CS team is, especially, as an early stage company, we're often releasing features or platforms. And we use the CS organization as the tip of the spear. Often like, hey, this is this new beta feature. Let's open it up to 7 customers. And even, early on, it's like, hey, these are the screenshots that we're having it. And at that point, we get not just usability, but like, hey, these are the really key use cases for me as a practitioner. Like, yes, you as a product organization have these really grand ideas of what it could do, but the CS organization really helps us hone it to make sure that it's super valuable on day one. And also, there's nothing like putting a real product in front of real customers to hone it in those first handful of weeks. So it's another similar thing that's a tangent thing that from what Brendon and Craig have mentioned.
Yeah, that's a motion we're starting to build out at Toast. Some of the teams in my group are starting to launch, alpha and beta products. We do leverage we home the RSMs, the regional success managers at Toast. We leverage them for validation. Kind of like first, they're talking to customers all day, so let's make sure we're not crazy. But also we're starting to build a system where we actually spiff them for adoption on new beta.
Really?
Features. So yeah, for example, we have this new product that we have 10, 15 customers on, and we want to get like the next 50 on just to like validate a little bit more scale. And so we carved out a few $1,000s to spiff the RSMs to get customers to adopt and transact on it. And what's great about that is it gives them a little taste of something a little different, right? And obviously some ability to maybe make $100 here or there, which is good. But also, it really makes us partners with them in rolling this out, right? We value them. We're not just going to throw a crappy product that doesn't quite fit or have, hasn't like solved the core problems and just throw it in their lap and let them deal with it. We're actually partnering with them and aligning incentive-wise to make sure that like by the time this thing's ready for GA, most of the success managers have already seen it. They actually know how it works. They probably know it better than most of the rest of the company. And that's a good trigger, Jonathan. That's really worked out well for us and something we're going to lean into more.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a lot about this, about the relationship between product and engineering in general. And you talk to anybody in our panel here, you'll hear a mixed world. Some say, hey, it's super awesome, and some say there is like a tension in between the two. But I think one thing that's probably for sure, and I think I'll talk about this more later on, is the more the people at each function understand each other's work, the better the relationship is going to be. And particularly when creating a new product, if you can get the CS and the customer involved with the product and engineers to do it, you're going to build a better product, but it also really brings these teams together and helps for relationships down the road. So it's a really fun way to get these teams tighter at a really fun part of the product.
Yep. Jonathan, I feel like that's so important, is understanding how each team operates and what their cadences are, what their processes are. Last year, the product team rolled out a new process, and I had my team read a book about it, because through that, they understood how the product team wanted to deploy beta features, where they were taking feedback, what types of things and feedback points were built into the process. And it really helped us align with them on, hey, we know that you're thinking about this at this stage and it's still in wireframe. We'd love to get you in front of a couple customers and maybe get early feedback. And so the CS team can provide early warm introductions, early feedback for the product team. So I do feel like that's so important to understand how each team operates and then working inside of that to get the best product out to customers.
1,000%. And the other trick here is that there's 1,000 books about how product runs the organization, whether it's Scrum, whether it's Basecamp's thing. There's actually very few books that people are grabbing off the shelf about how CS runs their job. I think it's almost more important, it's equally important for the product organization and the engineers to really put themselves in the shoes of the CSM, the director, and the VP in the CS organization. So that's something I keep on challenging my organization to do, and I think it's one of the most important things that a healthy organization can do.
Yeah, that's great. And Brendon, you're getting a bit to, getting that process and, getting that input. We're talking on both ends of the circle, right? So it's kind of early adoption input from the CS team. How about the beginning of that chain? So how does maybe talk through that process for as product is thinking about a new idea or vetting something new. You mentioned the wireframing. How does that process look at Crayon?
So let's see. You mean on the product side, or how we work together?
How you guys work together?
Yeah. So it's a great question. We've been doing a lot of product strategy talk at Crayon, and when we deploy features or look at the things that we could invest time in, where the product and CS teams come together on a strategic point is understanding the types of customers we expect to best utilize a feature and then the expected outcome. So instead of saying, for example, we think that building this, let's say, revenue tracking module in our platform is going to help all customers, what we say is, from a strategic standpoint, we think that our best and most integrated customers are going to get value here, and that will get deeper adoption in these features. Versus, let's say we expand the number of integrations we have. The conversation we have is very different because the CS team has intimate knowledge on how a customer is using the platform, what fitness they are in our product today, what their tech stack looks like. What we talk to the product team about is we actually think that this is going to expand the breadth of our customer base. And so let's say a customer today could use, in our integrations, we have 4 of them. Let's say they could use 2 and their adoption isn't quite as good. When we invest in expanding an integration, for example, when product puts that up, we say, well, here's a list of customers that we think could be really valuable. So we try to get that list over to them early. But we also say, from a strategic standpoint, we think that this is going to help more customers get deeper with us. So it's not necessarily going to help this bucket of customers over here, but it will help this one. And then we think that that's going to help expand, not just on the customer side, the value, but on the sales side, because as CSMs on the CS team, we also provide feedback to sales. What kind of expectations do we want? Who are our best fit customers today? So I think it's just understanding that we want that input and framing it around, are we going deeper with customers, or are we expanding more or less our market of customers who can use our product in a certain way?
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. And I think in there, you're getting at, different use cases, different types of customers. I see some head shaking there from Craig and Jonathan. Maybe let's say more about that, right? So how do you get the right thing to the right type of user?
Craig.
On new products specifically? What do you mean?
You can go any direction with that, whether it's new products, maybe might be better suited to what you're doing at Toast, or it could be, when you're looking at your broad base within Toast, that there's specific segments within that or specific tenures of customers that might be more ready for something versus others.
Yeah, I mean, at Toast, it's interesting because we're essentially an operating system for a restaurant, and we have over 50,000 restaurants, and the segmentation exercises you can do on restaurants is quite extensive, from the style of service that they have, to the cuisine they have, to the check sizes and menu item sizes they have. I'm learning a ton about it in the past year, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that we're doing, because I'm working on new products here, I think it's different. I can talk about Toast and I can talk about Drift, but at Toast with new products, a lot of the work we're doing is looking at new markets or new adjacencies to our current base. In many cases, it's sometimes non-restaurants, sometimes it's types of restaurants that we don't service today. And so there's a lot of work that goes into that segmentation. And then oftentimes what we found is that because we have such a large base and we've been around for so long, there's almost always dozens, if not hundreds, of customers in the base that fit that, who have just been using Toast as kind of a square peg, I guess. They've been just dealing with it, with its limitations. And so usually that's how we leverage our customer base and our CSM or RSM teams in our case to reach out and say, hey, listen, we're working on this new thing, this new segment, this new offering or whatever. We see there's 50 customers that look like customers of this. What do you know about them? And that feedback's amazing. They're like, oh yeah, they're using this workaround, and they have this partner plugged into it, and they have this this hack that they do, and you should talk to these 5 customers. And we've just found that to be an amazing conduit for research. So use the quantitative data and analysis on the base to then reach out to the RSMs, get some qualitative feedback, and then use their experience to then connect with the customers and get the real data from the customers. That's been pretty much a core motion for us. I have 6 teams right now working on 6 different things, and every single one of them is kind of using that muscle. I do have a little bit of a philosophy about talking to customers or talking to customer-facing people to get research. I think that most product people are very lazy. And they just don't talk to enough customers, and they check the box and they say, well, I talked to this CSM and these 4 salespeople, and this is what they're saying. I think that's fine, but that's only to allow, obviously you should be talking to your customer facing teams, but there's no substitute for actually talking to the customer. Right. And I think that goes for like research when I'm actually doing something new and going out as a product person. But I think it's also for feedback. And so I don't know how you run it, Brendon, but every customer needs this report, or every customer is stuck on this thing. What you don't want people to do actually is the product managers to say, okay, fine, we're going to work on the report, and then they ship the report and then learn from customers. No, get them on the phone with the customers. I don't know. One of the things I think is like the biggest secret is no product managers talk to customers. That's a secret. And not enough anyway. And so they all want to because their boss is yelling at them, right? What customers have you talked to? But they never do because they're busy doing all the other stuff that they have to do. So as a CS person, bring the product manager into the customer meeting, into your quarterly business review, into your weekly feedback or whatever. What's interesting with a good product team is you're transferring the customer problem to that product manager. Now it's their burden. Now they have ownership over it, right? And so that's a little Jedi mind trick that you should all try. But
it's funny, Craig, I've worn both these hats before, and this was like a big eye-opening thing for me. I've been a head of product before, and I've done talk to customers. I do my research, and you're right. Like it's like I'm committed. I have a conversation. I understand the problem, but the CS people, they're talking to the customer for reals. They really feel the pain when this click doesn't do the thing.
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah, but you have to bring so just to summarize that, I rambled a little bit, but like if you know that not enough product people talk to customers, their managers all want them to talk to customers, then as a CS person, your trick is to solve that problem for them. Hey, you should talk to this customer, right? But in doing that, what you do is you transfer ownership to that product manager, and then all of a sudden when you start doing that, you'll probably see this. I'm sure you've seen this, Brendon, but like the product managers start referencing that one customer in every story they're telling, right? When they're talking,
exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Like, oh, when I talked to Sally from blah 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 blah, this is what they said, right? And then you're like, great, I have 5 more Sallys for you. Let's talk to them, right? And then that's when it's starting to work. So
yeah, I love this, and this is a really great natural transition to our second topic, which is kind of connecting those dots between what the CSMs are hearing, what the CS team broadly is hearing, and product. So let's keep rolling on that. I'd love to hear, Brendon, kind of from your, as you hear what Craig and Jonathan's saying here, thoughts of that triggering for you, either things you're doing or things you'd think about doing differently.
Yeah, I think that there's like 2 things I think about. I think the first is how do we get the right level of information to the product team? And I think that a lot of that is about getting them on the phone, Craig, to your point, so they can hear directly from customers. We use Gong to record all calls, so we do that. And then we use Product Board to capture all of the insight that's, whether it's from Gong or a direct email. But we try to provide the product team with as much direct customer feedback, because when a CSM is talking to the product manager, there's always going to be something lost in translation. There's always a level of filtering. So having that product team get access to the raw material is, I think, super, super valuable. And then for me, what it does is we track so many different data points of our base. We track fitness, we track product adoption, we track expected outcomes. Like there's so much data that we have. But Craig, to your point, when a product person, let's say they listen to the gong versus going on the call, when they get on the call, they become connected. And it's not just a data point, it's not just an account name or a renewal date. It's like this person gave me this story. And so it gives life to the data that we're always presenting, because we trade a lot of data with our product team. And I think that's the nuance that can be missing if you're just relying on Gong or reading emails or talking to CSMs. Is okay, it's another data point versus Sally or Henry over at the customer said this, and I'm reinforcing it with the data that I have about our customer base. So I love that, getting product folks on the team. Our product folks are out there a lot, which we love. And the other thing is, for the CSM, it only makes the relationship better. I mean, the customers bought the product, they want feedback into it, they love being a part of that process. So when we can get them involved, then it not only gives life to the data and provides stories, but then we have another person that can touch and provide value for the customer. And in the best cases there, CSM will probably do an intro, be on a couple of the calls, but then the product manager will start developing a relationship with either the user or in some cases the executive decision maker directly. And then it's like we don't have to facilitate those. We can track it all in Salesforce. All of that's cool, but it's just the discussion is live. And again, you're just furthering the relationship.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of company or startup. If it's a startup, which it'd be great to get some stats. I know that's coming up from the group here. At the very early stages of a company, or at the early stages of a new product launch or new product that you're working on, I think product managers just have to be one-to-one with customers, and even engineers working directly with customers, because they're uniquely equipped to understand the problem, generate insights, and develop solutions. That's the unique skill that they have. And I think as it scales is where, and I think that's pretty obvious, right? You're in the early stage, everyone's on the phone all the time. As it scales is where it starts to get tricky, right? You start to get to a couple hundred people, and all of a sudden the feature request board comes in, or maybe there's notes in Salesforce or some other thing, and I think if there's one principle that I always work with my CS counterparts on is telling the solutions, like feature requests, is actually a fool's errand. Product teams are uniquely equipped to solve problems, not just process feature requests. And so I think if you just give too many feature requests to product teams, they'll tune you out. I really do believe they'll tune you out. But if you give them customer stories and customer problems, they will bring you in. And one of the things I love about Gong and some of the stuff you guys are doing at Quala is actually giving that raw data. So if I'm a CSM being like, hey, I just got off a call with so-and-so, one of our bigger customers, and they need this report. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, hey, I just got off a call with so-and-so, and they've got this problem because every Friday they have to present the metrics to their manager in their weekly meeting, and our current reports don't give them that data. What do you think is the best way to get them this thing for their Friday thing? Oh, by the way, here's a Gong snippet, or here's a link to Quala data that should show you like exactly how they're asking it. It's the same thing, but you're bringing the problem to the engineers rather than a solution to the engineers, and I think you're always going to be more successful doing that. I just haven't figured out how to do that at scale, to be honest with you. That's when it breaks down, and I have it. I mean, it's hard to scale. It's really, really hard to scale, but that's at least the spirit or principle behind, I think, the best way we can all work together.
Yeah, I love that train of thinking. It definitely rings true. In my experience at Quala, before Quala, right, is bring the Quala, or bring the problem to be solved, and your brilliant product team will figure out the solution. So many of us in tech companies are wired to like, well, here's what the solution must be. It's this feature, right? But I guess how do you make sure you're getting that right kind of problem level input from the team with folks predisposed to jump to like, oh, they said this, that means it's going to be this feature we need to add on. Actually, I'd rather you just tell me the problem we need to solve with the product.
So the one thing that I would recommend for CS organizations to do is I think Craig brought on a great point. Like if people keep on adding feature requests to a queue, eventually it'll be too long and gets drowned out. And the CS folks are at this intersection of having like this critical real-time, I need this thing fixed now, is a real pain I need to solve. So they're constantly having in this mode and say the easy thing for them to do is to create a ticket and send it to the product organization. But if they're able to, whether it's a weekly, monthly, take a look back and try to organize these things as themes. And yes, that's also on the product organization to listen and to turn into themes, but it's actually pretty cool when the CS organization does that as well. So like, I think there's like 3 main buckets that CS can bring to the product organization. One is like bespoke pain, this is painful right now. The other one is looking back at what you've heard the past month and bucket it into themes. And the other one is just being proactive. Like this is not in the theme stuff, but if this is, I'm hearing these things, I think if we add this feature, it would really be really beneficial to this customer base. I think that stuff is easier put together more that'll help the product team to come up with something to solve more macro things for the client base.
Yeah, at Drift, we put in, as we started getting bigger, some of the just, product team members knowing every single customer, we just got too big for that really quickly. And one of the systems we built was this thing called Customer Top 3. Mm-hmm. And it was a monthly, so it was a partnership between my design. So I was head of product, I had a head of design, and our designers were kind of generalists. So they did research and design, some better at research, but a couple of them who are really good at the research side partnered up with CS, and once a month would basically curate the customer top 3 with them by going through a little bit of an exercise to kind of evoke those themes and really what are the top things and go through an exercise. And then we use those top 3 themes then to trigger kind of blind spots that we have as a product team to do further research. But what was important about that was that it was only 3 things. So in fact, we kind of had an agreement. I don't want to see items 4 through 100 because there's only so much time and let's just focus.
Love it.
But I agree with you of like building, we never perfected it. I think it was okay. I think it was better than most product and CS teams work together, but I just don't think it was still great, to be honest with you. But like that same spirit of what are the themes, what are the big rocks that we're hearing, what are like the big problem spaces or big opportunity areas that we're seeing, and how do we get them as like 1 or 2 or 3 things we want to focus on in the next month or quarter or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Are there things you'd think of, whether that's you, Craig, or Brendon, kind of riffing on that, if you could flip your magic wand and make that process even better? Are there things that come to mind that would make that even tighter than limiting it to the 3 themes?
Oh, that's a good one, Mike. I do think, like Craig brought up a great point, and Jonathan, you talked about it too, about not bringing features in there. I love the top 3 idea. We have some sense of that. We have a balance of just things that customers keep asking for that CS is like pushing. But I do find that when we have discussions about trends, themes, use cases, problems versus this button here, then I think that those conversations are a lot more fruitful. And the product team oftentimes ends up designing or building something that is maybe slightly different from what we had thought, but solves the problem in a really good way. And is thoughtful because they're developing X, Y, and Z other parts, or those are in the works too. So I do think it goes back to understanding how the product team operates, how they work, where they accept feedback, and then just making sure that we know that too. Today, what we do is we actually service that out of support. So we have a process each month where support basically is gathering the themes of what are customers asking for, where are they tripping up, and what are the top ones. Like we don't get everyone funded, but again, I do find that when we talk about like, hey, here's the problem that they're running into versus, oh, the customer just wants this column in the export, right? I think that those are the ones that we actually get funded the most, and that we see a lot of improvement in like the working relationship between CS and product and ultimately value to customers.
Right. That's great. Let's, sorry, Craig, you gonna jump in?
No, you made an important distinction there between support and CS, and oftentimes they're conflated. I do think on the support side, I think it often can be a lot more tactical. Like that's where you can have the hey, this button has the wrong label on it, or we're missing this column in the report, and that would just unlock something. Whereas I think as CS, I would love CS to be put on like more of a strategic hat, and I think that the best way to do that is that problem or thematic, problem centric. Like if they know the customers that well, they should be able to connect the dots to some insights that would really drive the company forward. And like you said, not all of them will get funded, but whereas with support, it should be, hey, listen, we have a very simple KPI, which is, I mean, it could be like number of tickets per 100 customers, or it could be, and NPS, which is a trailing indicator, or other indicators. And obviously, we just need to continually improve to drive our ticket volume down. And if we have 35 tickets that are about a missing column in a report, just put the column in the report and move on.
Right.
Not overthink this one.
Yeah, no, and Craig, that's where, and Jonathan, I don't mean to plug Quala, but this is where I think what you guys are doing with Zapier and integrating and pulling everything in one place becomes really interesting to me, because to your point, Craig, the ideal state of a CSM is having those strategic conversations with the customer and then translating that internally to product. But where that starts to break down is when they have to go to 5 different places. They've got to go to Salesforce for this, Quala for that, Zendesk for this, Gong for that. What happens is they spend all their calories on going to find the information, that there's not much left for, okay, what is the trend? What does it mean? So again, I think that what you're doing with topics, Jonathan, where I think you've got Zapier, right? Is that the one that you're using, or did I just say that?
We had a different service, but something very similar to make it easy to bring these systems in place.
But like that, getting into one place means that the CSM can finally stop going to 5 places to say, okay, the customer emailed this, wrote a ticket about that, and here's what the Gong snippet says too. And instead say, okay, these are the 4 data points that I have. What does it mean? And I think that that's so central to it, to just making sure that you can enable CSMs to have that. Because you're right, Craig, that is the ideal state. We don't want, and ideally for a CSM to say this column, this button, this. We want them to say, look, when a customer starts their day, this is what they're thinking, this is what they like to do, and these are the roadblocks they're running up against.
We had a interesting story from Drift. We had this is early on in 2018 or so. Our sales team landed Slack as a customer, which was like a pretty marquee customer at the time.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and they were huge, right? It was like, holy crap, like this company's growing, and like we solved a big problem for them, but our reporting was so terrible, and we just the CSM was just getting beaten up. And that story about like the Friday meeting, actually, where we went was, okay, we've heard enough. We're going to invest in our reporting. It was attribution reporting, which was the question you said, which was like, do the executives know if this thing's working or whatever, right? And so I had a product manager, and I said, here's what we're going to do. You are going to handcraft Slack's Friday report for them every Friday. That's what you're going to. And literally, the product and engineering and design team built the Google Slides for them, and they just built the Google Slides for them every week with the data we pulled from the database. And then after 2 or 3 cycles of that actually working, where the executives were happy, then they actually went and like codified it and built it into a product. And then they got their 2nd to 10th customer and validated that it works for them. And then we ended up launching it. But that's how we started. Was we just said, let's just literally solve the problem for them. Let's just build the slide for them. And it worked really, really well. And it brings a lot of humility. Unfortunately, it's not very scalable, of course, until you figure it out. But I will tell you that after we launched that report, after being very regimented like that, it scaled. It worked, right? Like that was off the list. Like that theme was over. It was, and we just didn't get as many issues about that anymore because we solved it starting with one key customer.
Greg, you know what, I'm curious. So you've worked at like orgs of all sizes, and
Yeah.
you've operated at some scale. So I love that Slack example is awesome. And I guess, how do you balance experiences like that and solving problems like that with like where you are now, where you've got tens of thousands of accounts and data points, and you guys are running around? Where do you still try to get those experiences at that scale? How do you make that happen?
Well, this is where I think the as a product team, there's quantitative analysis that you can do, which is either market based or your customer base, where you can say like, oh, how big is this opportunity? So if we're making a new bet, it's how big is this opportunity? And we have a rubric that we don't want to invest unless it's a certain size, kind of like a VC firm, like big market, big opportunity. But the philosophy we have for launching new products is what I like to adopt this like 10x product launch. So start with one customer, then 10, then 100, then 1,000, then maybe somewhere between 100 and 1,000, you're ready for like a GA launch, at least at our scale, right? When I was at early stage companies, maybe it was like, okay, once I have 5 customers who like this thing's working for, I can blow it out.
Totally.
But at Toast size, we wait until we have hundreds of customers who have like proven it, and then we can turn on the demand gen and sales enablement machine. But still, it always starts with one customer, right? There's one customer you're building with in the beginning, no matter if you are Toast, who has 50,000 plus customers, or we were in Drift when I started, we had like 20 customers, right? And so it always started with one. And so you can't, in fact, that's where product teams fail all the time, is they rely on quantitative and market analysis or some kind of proxy metric instead of just building for a customer. So, and I know Jonathan, we've talked about some of the products you're building, some new extensions of your product. You're literally working with like 1 or 2 at first, and then you go to 3 or 4, and then you go to 5 and 6.
Every time. I think all best products are built with your customers. You need to have a thesis. You need to have some creativity with your product team. But if you're just doing this in your box, it's not going to work. And it's customers that have names that you're talking with very frequently. So I think your analogy was super spot on.
Yeah, I love where you're going with that. Let's dive in a little bit more on. So Craig, that's one watch out on broader building product or product and CS teams working together. Are there other kind of pitfalls or watch outs to share with the community on if you're doing something this way, maybe think about doing it a little bit differently, because you could get into trouble down the road? We've talked about kind of very specific diving into features versus use cases is a watch out. Any others that come to mind?
Brendon, what's your product? What's your team complain to you about in your weekly CS meetings with the product team? None of them are listening, I'm sure.
They want more features and they want it faster. No, I think when one of the things that I've always wanted from the product team is obviously heads up when something launches. Great thing about being at a company our size at Crayon is that we're launching and iterating quickly, but it's a little disorienting for a CSM who's like, I went in yesterday, awesome. I went in today, and wait a minute, there's 4 new things. I knew about one of them, right? So I think communication is super important. Heads up, because we got to demo the product and talk about features. But also I think ahead of anything that's meaningful, and I'm not talking about moving a button here or there or a column, even though I think those are valuable in many cases, it's having the product team answer the what, why, and how of something that comes out for my team. And the reason I say that is because when we don't understand what is being launched, why and the expected value, and how a customer should use it, then we fill in those gaps, because those are the requirements for us to demo it to a customer, explain the value, and try to get them to use that feature, that module, that product, whatever just came out. So where we have had struggles historically is when the product team says, okay, we built this new module, it's going to track revenue. And then we say, okay, we get the what it is, but like why? And just tracking revenue, like why is it going to help our customers? And then how do we want them to use it? And when we got that in the past, we had really successful launches and strong adoption. It always takes longer, but at least strong adoption down. And when we haven't, what we've seen is that there's like a spike in, I call them like looky-loos, people that just look at the thing, they test it the first time, and then they never come back. It's because my CSM team is basically out there filling in why this is valuable for each individual customer and how that customer should use it. So they don't have a repeatable motion on it. They don't have a repeatable demo. And so I think that that's super important for CS and product to either collaborate on it or to get that right before anything comes out for really key features that we think are going to move the needle for a customer.
Hey guys, I'm just looking at the community chat here, and there's some actually interesting conversation that Todd brought up here. And his question was, any product teams inherit new customer requests that are overpromised in the sales cycle, and how does that deal with when it hits product and CS? I've never personally experienced this in my organizations. Just kidding.
I was just gonna say, wow.
No, I feel like this is a tale as old as time. But I'm curious, when that happens to you guys, like it's a super real thing that's a pain felt by both CS and product. And how have you guys dealt with experiences like that?
I'd love to hear your perspective, Brendon.
We have a good relationship with sales, so we see a lot less of it now. It's actually pretty rare at this point to see it because sales and CS have a pretty decent relationship and there's a strong level of trust. Now, in the past, that wasn't always the case. I mean, the reality is we try to get out in front of anything as quickly as possible. I'm thankful that our product and engineering team, in some cases in the past, they were made aware, and we actually had discussions ahead of time. Look, is it on the roadmap? Can we move it forward? If not, when do you expect? Give us a quarter. And so those are easier conversations to have, obviously, when you don't have that product or feature today, where it's broken down and become really problematic in the past. It's just a situation where we say, look, we're going to get it on the roadmap for you. We can't make any promises. We try to explain to the customer as much as we can the complication of doing it. We try to showcase other use cases. But at the end of the day, it's a tough situation, and you really just got to be open and honest with the customer and do it immediately. Because on call 3, if they find out that the thing that they really thought was not good, and then it's a real disaster. But we try to intercede immediately, open and honest communication. If it's just going to go totally off the rails, and talk to a customer realistically about, look, here's what we can do instead. Try to find workarounds.
Yeah, I think
that's a tough one. Yeah, what were you gonna say, John?
I think it's right. Like I think this is something that a lot of early organizations run into, that they make it falls onto CS and products, and they weren't involved in the decision. And I think more and more now you see hopefully healthy organizations where they're, hey guys, really important customer coming on here. It's going to be really important for this next board meeting, this next raise. We kind of need to happen. It's going to blow up this thing. Let's strategize. Maybe there's some conversations we can have with the prospect to say, let's push it to Q2 next year. And they'll be cool with that. Let's work together and problem solve. Because sometimes these things are reality. But ideally, it's not like, hey guys, whoops, here you guys go, which also happens. That's just an uncomfortable situation.
I've gotten into trouble more. The biggest mistakes I've made with product is making promises to customers on roadmap stuff that doesn't exist. And so I learned to just never do it. And instead, what I do with them is I say, sales rep will pull me in and say, oh, this is a big customer. We'd love to get them. We're going to bring you in. Right. And what they're looking for me is to say yes. And usually what I pivoted to is I say, let me tell you about how we build products here. Nice. And I give them that kind of that same 110, 100 speech. We know that the thing is a valuable thing. We're excited that you want it. I will commit to you that I will assign you a product manager to work with you to figure out how to build this thing. But I can't commit to you on when it's going to be done, when it solves your problem, when it's as good as the competition or whatever. But what I will commit to you is I will have a product team that works with you to figure this out, and you will be customer number one. But in order for me to do that, I need you to meet with my team a lot. You're going to be spending 2 hours a week with my team, maybe even 3 hours a week with my team to help shape and build this product. Are you in for that? And if they're in for that, then we'll go ahead and do it. If they're not in for that, and of course you probably have to have alignment at the executive level to make sure this is a bet to make, this is the right customer to do this on. If they're not aligned to put in the effort on their side, then I politely just say, without that level of involvement, I don't think this is going to work, because how can we ever solve your problem and other customers' problem at scale without doing that level of work with you in the beginning? And so usually that works. It either scares them off, or they're like, yeah, I would love to do that. I would love nothing more than spend a ton of time creating this capability in your product with you. And that's worked out quite well.
That's great. That's great. We're getting a bunch of, I know we have about 8 minutes to go here, and we have a bunch of Q&A coming in. So just thank you guys. Some really great commentary. Without formally transitioning, we've been covering some of those best practices for CS and product teams working together, everything from communicating together to talking in use cases and customer problems and not jumping right to feature solutions. Very interestingly, we got to the beginning of product development and at the same time being obviously engaged at the end when you're releasing things and the feedback loop throughout. So some really, really good stuff in there, getting at the Brendon, as you put it, the what, the how, and the why when something new comes out. So some really good stuff here. So I'll dive into some Q&A. I'm sure more will come in as we're talking through. I'm reading it as I'm looking at it right now. So first question, do any of you see actual product roadmap pivots based on customer feedback? In my experience, often a product team is decided on a path and it's sometimes tricky to get a reprioritization based on some of that real-time customer input. We'd love to know if you have any successful tactics in doing this or if you've seen situations like that before.
Brendon, have you?
Yeah. We don't get everything we ask for. We always come for a list. I've always got a list of 1,000 features and 100 themes. But yeah, I have. We're going to deploy. It's like it's a fix for, not a fix, but it's a feature update for one of our modules that helps our power and administrator users just manage their deliverables in there, and we're going to deploy that there. And that got on the roadmap and got prioritized because we had a couple customers talking about the use case, getting their feedback, understanding what they were trying to do, and then it got deployed. So we don't move the needle on everything. We're cognizant of that, but and I think it helped that we understood how the product team operated, the different things that they were looking for feedback, when we could intercede and ask. But yes, based on customer feedback, we've absolutely done that. Of course, again, not everything that I want, but definitely we reprioritize features. Our product and engineering teams try to move quickly and try to leave a little slack so that they could pick up some of these things that they know are going to come in there.
Yeah, I think it depends on how the product team works and where the strategy comes from. And I think as a CS person, you'll be a lot more successful at influencing these pivots or potential pivots or something you see is so obvious. Like, why aren't we doing this obvious thing? You gotta look at how the product team works. And I think they largely work in kind of there's a whole spectrum, but two general ways. Is the product team very like bottoms up, customer driven, meaning like, if there's a VP of product and maybe a director or two, and then, I don't know, a handful of product managers, are those product managers working with CSMs directly? Are they working with customers? Are they given objectives to hit, and then their job is to figure out the product to go solve it? Are they driving the strategy at the ground floor, if you will? Or is the strategy coming from founder? Is the bet that we're making coming from the CEO, or is it coming from the head of product? If it is, then those ground floor PMs are just project managers. They're not product people, right? They're just implementing the vision that the founder has. And so if you're trying to influence those project managers, they're still called product managers, but I draw the distinction. If you're trying to influence them to change their roadmap, they're not, because their incentives are not customer adoption or customer happiness. Their incentives are making sure that they execute by the due date that the CEO wants.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, you're never going to influence it. You have to get your boss or maybe your boss's boss to go talk to the CEO to influence them with real customer data. But if you are in this scenario where the product managers are actually talking to customers, valuing time with the CSMs, actually look at data, are measured on their outcomes like adoption and revenue, then I think you're going to have a lot more success working directly with them. So that's like just one thing to look for. I'm not saying that top-down could be bad. I mean, there's lots of companies like Apple under Steve Jobs where top-down worked. But most companies, it doesn't. Most people aren't Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. So, you know, try to work for, if you work for a company, try to work for one that has product managers who actually work with customers at the ground floor.
That's great. That's great. And is there a, you know, between anybody here on the panel, question that's a two-parter from Kylie? I'm not going to get to the first part because we're going to expire in 180 seconds. You know, a 30-second answer to, you know, the best way to push back on straight feature requests that don't describe the problem or the job to be done.
Yeah, I don't think it's a pushback as much as it is a question. So and this might answer the template question from Keely as well. But we had my CS team drove to ask me for a feature request board for so many years, and I said no so many times. I finally buckled and I actually created a thing. It was called customer pain board. It wasn't a feature request board. And in the customer pain board, the template said, "What is the pain that the customer is having? What is evidence that the customer? What are some evidence you can share? Gone links or emails or other that the customer is having this pain point? And then, you know, if you have a feature idea, what might that feature idea be to solve this pain?" But that was like the end. So it was a little bit of a template, and also it was just asking the question of like, what's the problem? What's the problem? Just get the. If you haven't studied 5 whys, root cause analysis, that's a good way too. Just keep asking why until you actually get to the problem.
That's great. That's great. Well, we are just about up on time. I think it's a great wrap for this session. Craig, Brendon, Jonathan, thank you so much for a really engaging community hour. On behalf of Quala, you know, thank you everybody in the community out here for joining. Again, if you're interested in quantifying any of this data, feel free to dial us up over here at quala.io. Be on tune for a recap of the session, which you can kind of see the key highlights, see the recording, share with any friends. And then, of course, stay tuned for our next community hour, which will be coming up in a month and a half or so. So thanks again to the panel, and thanks to everybody in our great community, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.